to another episode of Overrated. I'm Michael J. O'Connor.
James Fluty.
Yes, and this week we're continuing on with our movies you may have missed. With a really awesome kind of... I thought it would be huge because it's so bizarre. Gem Colossal, directed by Nacho Vigalondo, starring Anne Hathaway and Tim Blake Nelson, who's amazing, Jason Sudeikis, who's amazing in this. And it's a weird, funny, scary monster movie.
yeah. Different kinds of monsters in it. But
yeah. It's a kind of a short description, and tell me if I'm way off here. But a monster appears in South Korea, and Anne Hathaway is kind of a, I don't know, early 30s, sort of party animal, still partying a little too late in life, moves back to her small town, and this monster shows up, but it appears that it has some connection with her drinking and going to this one park. And it's just crazy. And you find out that she is controlling the movements of this thing. It's super creative. The guy who directed it made this other movie called Extraterrestrial that's also just really out there.
He's made a lot of really cool films.
Yeah.
Time Crimes is fantastic. And Open Windows, although I didn't love, was really creative.
Yeah.
So he's just, I get really excited. It's interesting. I haven't seen Extraterrestrial yet, so.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing more films by him.
Totally. How did you did you find out about it before we talked about it? Did you see Colossal before that?
Yes.
Okay.
I found out about it because I saw the description and went like, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, I like sort of magical realism-y kind of stuff. And then when I saw who it was, because I was such a huge fan of Time Crimes, I started looking at that guy up like immediately after I saw that years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And so I went, oh, it's that guy. I love that guy. And so then I wanted to see it. And then I saw Open Windows after that, because that one's streaming on Netflix. You guys can go check that out.
Oh.
If it's still there by the time this airs.
Right. They tend to take things away quickly.
Yeah.
Bring
back 30 Rock!
Right. Hashtag bring back 30 Rock. Hashtag Firefly.
Starting a movement.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they took out Firefly, too.
Oh, yeah. I really liked... I like that magical realism as well, where it's... you have this completely, seemingly normal story, and then a monster shows up. I love that.
There's something so compelling about a story that is so well written that you don't need the monster.
Right.
That a good comparison would be Pan's Labyrinth.
Totally.
Where you have these really rich characters, you have this very interesting setting, and then also, what the fuck? Here's a weird creature with magic, and
yeah.
Why not? And so I really love that kind of. It's kind of like a good sci-fi movie or story. Sure. You don't need the science fiction if it's written well enough.
Sure. Well, if you have human stories and yeah. And I will always love. Maybe it's because it's how I feel. But like, did you ever see Young Adult with Charlize Theron and
Patton Oswalt? Yeah.
I always like movies about like kind of losers in their 30s. Because, I don't know, no particular reason. But it's a compelling, kind of story to me because you see so much there's so many like angry young men stories that, then moving on when that's not cute anymore is I like that.
There's also, I think, there's a plethora of angry young men stories, and there's far less angry young women stories.
Totally.
One thing I remember occurring to me a few years ago is I was thinking about a lot of the authors I've read, and I was thinking like, I haven't read as many female authors, and then I was like, well, there's just there's not as many because I read a lot of classic literature.
Yeah.
And there's just not as many. Women were discouraged from writing and stuff like that, And you can sort of look at that and go like, well, that's not anymore. And it's true that that's not anymore in its own right. But that means you didn't have as many characters to connect to growing up as a young girl.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they get sort of trained to place themselves in another person's life. And a lot of people don't need that same training because all the protagonists resemble them. If you're middle class, or upper class, middle class, white male, there's a lot of work for you to be able to identify with.
There's 1,000 Holden Caulfields out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's like, that is interesting because that's a perfect example, Holden Caulfield, that, and I love The Catcher in the Rye. I stand by that. But who is? And it's funny they're stopping to teaching that book in high schools because students are like, I hate this kid, which is the point, but they're finding it unreadable.
I wonder if there might be generational differences. When I read it, I read it after high school, so
same here.
It was a little different. But when I read it, I went, oh my god. This is a magnification of the douchebag I was in high school.
Yeah.
Like this is it's a magnification of the, self-involvement and the complete detachment of any kind of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like, and there's something really brilliant to that. Also, just the struggle and the pain and the questioning and the there's a lot. There's not just him being an ass. I was
right,
but. And I did feel a real connection to that book. I felt a real connection to all of Salinger's stuff. I also felt a very deep connection, which I read years later, to Sylvia Plath.
Oh yeah,
and I felt like that's like Lady. In some ways, it's like the female version of Catcher in the Rye.
Totally,
she's not nearly as flawed in the way that she's not shown to be a hypocrite the way that Holden Caulfield is constantly.
Right.
But she is dealing with very dark things and in a young age, and it connects with that sort of isolation. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie captures a bit of that too. The main character is very confused, very lost, a lot of self-loathing.
Yeah. One of my favorite details in it that made me laugh every time is she's constantly passing out on the floor or leaned up against a wall. And it was perfect because whenever in movies when someone does that, they wake up and kind of look around, where am I, But every time she woke up in that kind of position on the floor against the wall, she'd be like, like her back hurt. Like that, okay, if you're 19 and you fall asleep like that, it's not a big deal. But if you're 34, it hurts bad. It hurts bad to fall asleep like that.
If you pass out from drinking, like in the wrong position, doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah.
I remember one time just falling asleep, passed out, and then the next day, somehow I slept. Somehow, all of my body weight on my collarbone. I don't know how that happens, but it hurt for like 2 days.
Oh no. Ugh. Yeah, I just thought that was a fun detail. Please go ahead.
I think they tackle that well, particularly the ending. Again, if you're going to watch this, there's spoilers, so don't listen to the podcast if you're concerned with that. But the very end, that line was amazing, where she says, "You want to hear a story?" and the other character's like, "Oh yeah, you want to drink?" and then she's just, "Oh shit!" like I still have to be in this. It's not all fixed,
right? I
still have to exist in this world and grow as a person. That sucks.
Still lives in that house.
Best. Loved it. Loved that ending.
Oh shit. Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's a fascinating. It was a fascinating movie, man, and Jason Sudeikis was great. He was really scary, scary. I didn't know that he is George Wendt's nephew.
He is.
Yeah,
I read that.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of weird relations, like weird relatives in Hollywood.
Right.
So what I liked about Jason Sudeikis in this is that he ends up being terrifying.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons he's terrifying is he seems like the protagonist in the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. He seems like the friend, the confidant, the person that's going to stick up for her.
Yeah.
And I think what they do is they draw you in as an audience the way someone would be drawn into an abusive relationship in real life.
Sure. Is
that there is a 180. And I find it really interesting the way people describe movies that tackle this as almost like they're horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah. What's another example of that?
Well, a big example for me recently was Big Little Lies.
Oh,
it was a TV show. Okay, it's a TV show on HBO. Mm-hmm. There was also a book. Leanne Moriarty wrote it. And not Moriarty. Close to that, though.
Okay.
Mari T. Anyway, there's another author with a similar name.
Right.
And Stephen King wrote the blurb on the book, and it was like, this book is scary as hell, or something like that.
Right.
And Stephen King, he writes books about weird monsters growing out of people's eyes and attacking,
cars that kill people, and
yeah. For most of his books fall pretty in line with the horror genre.
He has one about cell phones that kill people. It's it's ridiculous.
So when
a radio that committed identity theft, it's just
a sewing machine who's generally abusing people on Twitter.
Right.
I like what's the computer doing it.
Alt-right VCR.
So here's a guy who writes horror. So you say that on a book. I'm thinking this book has like a serial killer or something like that. And then I see it. That's not in there. It's an abusive relationship. It's a man abusing a woman, and it's not done in any kind of over the top way. I think it's done in a very real way.
Yeah.
And then another friend of mine who's a big horror fan, he watched it, said he loved it, and he was like, "Oh man, that was scary." And I even asked him like, "What was scary about it?" And he goes, "Like the relationship in there." And I'm wondering, like, is it just because I've made that leap to begin with, or are people saying this is scary? Are they realizing that this is something that happens all the time? It's a very real situation.
Could be.
I wonder.
Yeah, it could be. I was definitely, as far as Jason Sudeikis' character, I was suspicious of that guy right away. I'm always, when he's bringing her stuff, bringing her a TV, it's hard to look at that and not be like, well, the bill always comes due,
Yeah, once you got to that point, you knew something was up.
Totally.
But like before then, when they just sort of meet the first day and they talk about being friends and he's just sort of hanging out with her.
Yeah.
They set him up as a very nice guy who seems to have a very old, unrequited love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
So just very sympathetic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm trying to think of, like, it depends. I mean, it depends on, maybe there's some amount of projection, that you're afraid of. Like, for example, we've talked about The Shining before. My father will not watch that movie. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because it's about a father who goes crazy and murders his family. And I think
he's been on the verge of that so many times.
Totally. 100. We've been on vacations, totally. And so I think, like, for example, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, that movie with Richard Burton and I want to say Kathleen Turner, but that's not it. Shit. What's her name?
Catherine Hepburn?
No, Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor. Okay.
That movie is very scary to me, and the play itself was very scary to me, just because it's something. They're just these two crazy old people.
I've never seen it.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's just for some reason there's nothing. It's not a horror, but to me, there's a projection of something. Maybe sometimes what you're afraid of being, what you're afraid of encountering. I don't know.
Or maybe you're being forced to look at something that is out there. Whereas normally you can just shut it off and go like, oh yeah, that's so sad.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, he was pretty terrifying Also because he was definitely a sociopath. And
willing to murder people,
sure,
innocent people, yeah,
to prove a point. And I love Tim Blake Nelson in this. He was great. He's so good in everything.
Tim Blake is great in everything. Yeah, he's always great.
He has one of
The Island. He was even good in that.
Yeah. He's in this movie, The Good Girl, with Jennifer Aniston and John C. Reilly. He's got the best line in there. He says, "If I was a woman, I would be a slut, a lesbian slut." He's so good at playing like a bumpkin.
That is like 80% of his roles.
Totally, yeah. But
he's done a lot of directing too.
Has he? Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, look up his IMDb. He's done a lot of directing. I think he's even written a couple episodes of something. Yeah,
into it.
I think a lot of the character actors who are funny looking, like Tim Blake Nelson or Steve Buscemi, they kind of go, "This wave's not lasting forever."
Yeah,
better get behind the camera. And there are also people like who developed personalities. They're not like the son of someone famous and really attractive, so everyone loved them all the time, always.
Totally.
They actually had to, become smart and engaging and sophisticated on some level.
Totally.
Steve Buscemi has directed a bunch, and he even wrote and directed for The Sopranos when that was out.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that show.
Mm-hmm. Come to think, I don't know if he wrote for The Sopranos. He definitely directed.
He did this movie, Living in Oblivion. Did you ever see that?
No, I haven't.
It's really interesting. He plays a director who's working on this independent movie, and just everything's going terribly wrong, and he keeps reimagining this one scene as a different genre. Kind of, gimmicky movie, but entertaining. He's fantastic. I really loved the monster design in this too. I love monster movies. And, I love Cloverfield, and I like any kind of big disaster movie. And this was it was awesome. It just happened to come out the same week as the new Shin Godzilla. It was like the newer Godzilla that came out. That's like, how in the old ones, it's always like an allegory for like nuclear war. Mm-hmm. In this one, they had him. It was Godzilla was just an allegory for climate change, and like
I don't remember this. I remember this isn't the one where he goes to San Francisco.
No. This is all in this is in Japanese.
Oh, it's Japanese. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's why I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah, they just decide like, oh, we're just gonna live with him. Like, we'll just do nothing. We'll pretty good.
Rebuild after he destroys little sections here and there. That's interesting.
Yeah. But so it was a good week for monster movies with this one.
So I thought the last American Godzilla that was made was an allegory for waiting.
For waiting,
just waiting for something to happen.
Is that the one with Matthew Broderick? Was that the last one?
No. It was the one with Bryan Cranston had a small role in it.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think I saw it.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Okay. I see.
Actually, a lot of people really liked it. I just felt like the last 10 minutes were awesome because Godzilla is just fighting this other giant monster. Right. I'm just like, yeah, finally! It's like a 3-hour long movie, and every time they go to a new city, they'd be like Miami.
Right.
And then they go like Nevada, and every time I'd just be like, not Godzilla. Still nope. Not here either. They show like the destruction of Godzilla, after he'd left.
Right.
Oh, that thing's broken.
Right. Well, you just missed him. You
should have seen it. It was crazy. It's blowing stuff up. That thing just flew right up there, exploded. Then he jumped through the flames. It's no good describing it. It's really not.
You really had to be there. If only there was a way.
You'd think someone would have gotten it on a cell phone, but nothing.
Strangely enough.
Something for the poets to describe in the years gone by.
Oh, God. I really, I liked this because I also thought it was, and it's something we've talked about before for sure, but it was definitely a good portrayal of like townies and people who go to the same bar every night. And, you know, those people are around, man.
It's a weird, I can't connect with that, but I also can't connect with the people who are just sort of like, I moved out of there, therefore I won. I passed the test of the small town. Yeah. Like, I don't find people in cities more interesting than people in just people are dull. Yeah. In general, I'm dull. You're dull. Everybody's fucking dull. Yeah. Like, there's not like oh, I live in this zip code, therefore I'm interesting now. Right. No. Right. I go to a nicer bar. Yeah. There's you totally still have the same dumb opinions as everyone else, like myself. Totally.
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes I think, because I lived in San Francisco for a long time, and sometimes I still live like an hour away from there, but I think oh man, it'd be cool to live there. But then I'm like, I don't do anything. I would just be sitting in my house there.
That's why I describe that to people a lot. They go do you miss San Francisco? I miss things about it, but 9 out of 10 days I didn't do anything. Right. Yeah, I'm just inside reading a book, watching a movie. I live inside my head. My head's with me no matter where I go. So right.
Yeah, I wasn't frolicking near the Golden Gate Bridge every day when I was there and windsurfing and
It's that great Onion article, only 80% of New Yorkers visit Statue of Liberty every day.
That's hilarious.
I'd rather, honestly, as I've become an adult, I realized I just want to live wherever's cheapest.
Totally.
Wherever, I can afford to not work constantly.
Yeah.
I got to see some cool shows when I was in San Francisco, but that's about it. It's not worth the $10,000 a month rent.
Oh my God. The last time.
It is beautiful. It is an absolutely beautiful city.
It is. No, it's great. Yeah.
I love the history, but not worth the money.
The last place we looked for when we were living there was a 1-bedroom apartment in the basement of the apartment building that was next to the washer and dryers. So when we walked in, it was wet. Everything was wet. And it was $3,600 a month. Good Lord. We're like, holy shit. Yeah.
Is that a family of frogs? You're gonna get some frogs. Yeah. And the humidity brings them in.
When when I was really young, maybe about 19 or 20, you might remember this. I don't know. We lived in this big house that there was 2 separate units and 7 bedrooms. And when we signed the lease for the place next door, the landlord, we were signing the lease, and the landlord goes, "Oh, that's right. And I forgot to mention, Tony lives upstairs in the bedroom up there." And we were like, "I'm sorry, what?" And there was a guy named Tony that lived in one of the rooms upstairs, and he just came with the house. And we lived a bunch of 19-year-olds lived with this guy who's in his maybe early 60s. And every now and again would come downstairs and just kind of weird everyone out, and then he'd go back up to his room. He left every day. I don't know what he did. But yeah, I was like, oh, this place comes with Tony.
What really struck me is I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
Aspect of it.
I know.
Oh, by the way, P.S.
Tony comes with the place.
Slipped my mind. Yeah. There's an elderly man living in the room.
And he one time gave me his book. He was a writer, and he wanted me to read his book. And so I read his book, and every character was named Tony.
Oh my God! You lived with Henry Darger.
Totally. Except not talented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy God.
Anyway,
every character was named Tony.
Yep.
Maybe that was brilliant.
Maybe
that was one of it went over your head at the time.
Could be. I don't know.
Just it would be what's his name? Charlie Kaufman.
Right.
He's just
right.
An Anomalisa.
Totally.
He was going for the exact same kind of metaphor.
Totally. Right. Yeah. I mean, I wish to God I had it now that I could. Oh man, the folly of youth, living with Tony. But you got to grow up, and that's what this movie Colossal is all about.
It is largely about living with an elderly man.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I felt like the relationships outshined it, and it didn't become too bad as sort of an allegory.
Mm-hmm.
But I did find his resentment of her, I thought was interesting because she didn't feel, or at least they didn't delve into her feeling any kind of superiority. You know, like in her mind, she hadn't accomplished anything. She wasn't any better than him. She thought his bar was awesome.
Yeah.
And was cool the way it was.
Right.
And it was completely in his head that she thought she was better than him, that she thought she was so great and I'm some loser. And I feel like that's something most of us do. We create these scripts in our head and we live by them, and they're complete fantasies.
Well, we project, you know, and I feel like so much of that movie was about projecting, you know, quite literally
projecting a monster. Yeah,
totally. You know, because how often have you? I mean, I know I have, you know, been defensive towards somebody for something you think they think. That you've just because you see it in yourself and you are you want to immediately defend that. I mean, I've done that constantly.
I think one of the things that I've done is that you know, I was very depressed, very, very depressed for very many years, and the projection I had was like, no one cares what I do or say.
Yeah.
So I said all these kind of things that would be kind of mean in retrospect. And it was just because, like, what? They don't care.
Right.
You know, like, if someone goes, like, hey, you want to come hang out? And I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. Right. Like, in my mind, they're just like, they don't really want to hang out with me, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care, you know? And it's such a mean thing to do.
They're going to be relieved. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. They're going to be, that's one less person they have to deal with at their party.
Right.
And they don't, yeah, and I really didn't, I projected that apathy on other people.
Right. Huh. That is interesting. I'm sure I've done the same thing. Yeah, no one cares what I think, so I'll just be a dick because they don't care.
Well, it's not even like I'll be a dick. It's more like, you know, like I don't have to have a filter.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm basically like that delightful scamp who comes in who can't possibly offend because everyone knows they're smarter than him.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, like
right.
Like that obtuse character in an old vaudeville play or something. Just like no one's offended by him.
Right.
He comes in and he goes, "Nah, y'all got it wrong." And you go, "Oh, James."
Thank God you're here.
You're delightful entertainment for about 30 seconds at a time, and then we'd prefer if you leave.
I knew it. Yeah, I'm sure I've done that. I certainly I like it really. So many people in that movie are. Oh man, like it was hard. Okay, one of the things that was really hard watching for me was the Jason Sudeikis' character when he's moping, when he's in total like mope mode, because that to me I was like, oh, that was hard to watch because I've done that and I've, you know, what's wrong? Nothing. It's fine. Why don't you just go ask whatever? You know, that was tough, and that's something that I think people do. You know, well, in past the time where it's acceptable, you know. I've certainly done that. That was a tough watch for me.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
I've done that very many times, and I will probably do it again.
I'm going to do it today.
Oh, here it comes.
No, it's fine, James.
Angry
Whatever.
Mikey.
No, it's fine.
Here come the waterworks. Jason Sudeikis did a fantastic job. He made it all very real. And I think one of the little moments I liked, which I think I could see someone disagreeing with me on this one, but is at one point the main character says, she's kind of staring at him, and he won't let her leave. And she says, like, I was wondering why you were doing this. And it's like, were you trying to control me? Were you secretly in love with me? But it's really because you hate yourself.
Right.
And I liked that just because I felt like it was needed, because you're going like, why is she still here?
Yeah.
Why is she,
Right.
And you're also like, what is his motivation? And you go like, oh, she's aware. She's a self-aware person. She knows what's going on, and I think it grounded her in that moment.
She did kind of refuse to be victimized by anybody.
She refused to be victimized by him, but you kind of get a better understanding of why she's there, because she's trying to save other people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a situation, I think a lot of people in abusive relationships probably are dealing with, because they have children. And so they have family. And I think a lot of, I'd imagine, I don't have experience with it, but a lot of people in those situations probably do threaten people that they love.
Yeah.
It would be a very easy tool to manipulate someone.
I thought it was interesting. Boy, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, it is much more about like cycles of abuse than I'd even thought about, because now it's been a little bit since I watched it, because we had to take a break, which is not going to make sense because we took a break months ago when this is airing. It's not important, but
fires.
Yeah, but at the end, when you did find out that when they were kids, he threw the model into the park, right? Okay, so he had already been kind of shitty up until that point. Okay, yeah, if I'm remembering it correctly. So it's a lot about and especially with that ending, how difficult it is for people to change. Especially with that shit. Like, I'm just gonna go through this whole thing again. Change is very difficult, and especially difficult the older you get.
Also, I think it's pointing out that it's not a thing that ends, and then this new chapter where that is some part of your past starts.
Right.
Whether it be substance abuse, whether it be actual emotional abuse and problems in relationships, it's a thing you will have to work on the rest of your life.
Right.
It does not stop. There isn't a moment where you go like, oh, glad that's done.
Yeah. Totally. Right. It's a constant improvement is a kind of constant work that you have to be doing, but I don't wanna.
It's they've done a study with like eating habits. Okay, so they do an MRI of someone's brain, and let's say they eat junk food, and their brain does this thing where it's like, yes, I love it.
Right.
And then they eat healthy food, and their brain goes, this sucks. And then give me that bad food. All right. So you can actually rewire your brain so that it does I love the food. But it takes like months and months and months of just eating good food that your brain is like, this sucks. And so you're kind of miserable for months and months. But then your brain starts going, okay, you know what? I kind of like this. It's pretty good. Okay, give me more of this. And you do that. It takes months to get there. And then 2 days of eating junk food, and all of that work reverses, is what they find. And that's where it's work, and it's constant work for the rest of your life, because those initial synapses and the way your brain develops and your genetic coding and all that, you have to overcome all of that.
Yeah.
In order, and all of that can go right back to step one, just square one.
Huh. I had that.
So that's
for a long, because I smoked cigarettes for a long time, and I started using one of those electronic cigarettes like right when they came out, and I was like, okay, this is great. This is bad. I've since changed my opinion on those, but at the time I was like, this is better. Like, okay, I got this, and so I used that for like a year, and was like, okay, I'm good, and I started working at this restaurant where everybody smoked, regular cigarettes. And I bummed one after like over a year of not smoking cigarettes. I had one and was immediately like, oh, this is so much better. This is fantastic. And immediately started smoking again. And then eventually, I've haven't smoked for years now, but it was interesting how quickly we can get back into patterns. Yeah, after all that time.
I think it's one of the reasons why in AA they say you're always an alcoholic.
Right.
You know, there's no time where like if you haven't had a drink for 10 years, you're still an alcoholic.
Sure.
Because if you have that drink again, it goes right back to square one.
Right. Maybe not right away.
Most of us probably.
Maybe not right away, but those patterns always. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've all known someone, just because that's such a prevalent problem in life,
sure,
that has had that. You know, like I've known people that you find out that this one guy I know, he was older than I was, but he apparently had been sober for something like 15, 20 years.
Wow.
And then then like these really tragic things happened to him, and he started drinking and doing drugs, and it went from like, middle class, Jesus freak kind of good guy to getting kicked out, hoarder, meth,
Crazy.
And it can happen so quickly.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth on whether or not I believe that, just because it's just a personal thing, but whether or not I believe that addiction is a disease, or whether I certainly believe that it's something you're genetically predisposed to. But as far as the disease model, I have issues with. But I do think, once you are in that tract, it's so hard to get out of it. Like you say, we both known people that have, yeah.
I have read once, and I don't know. I haven't been able to verify this, so if anyone wants to correct me, you're welcome to. But that the disease model is based partially on looking at other cultures that have referred to it as a disease, and seeing a dramatic decrease in abuse after it being seen that way.
Oh, interesting.
Partially because they're actually looking at ways to fix it that aren't just like pull yourself up from your bootstraps.
Right.
And then also people who are alcoholics are actually treated with some sort of empathy. Whereas if you just look at it like they're just weak,
right?
They're just ruining. Like, why don't they stop?
Yeah,
it doesn't help anything.
Right. It's like that.
So even if the model doesn't necessarily fit the scientific terminology for a disease, it can possibly be a better way to functionally look at it.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's like that old Mitch Hedberg bit. What is it? That's the only disease you can get yelled at for. Damn it, you got lupus.
Marie Bamford has a great bit because she's talking about mental health. And she says if you were to talk about other cancers the way people talk about mental health.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I know we all get cancer, okay?
It's like, get over it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I get my chemo and then I get back to work.
Right.
I think, I think everyone thinks, it's very rare to hear everyone thinks that they've had it the worst.
Totally.
And that everybody else is just whining.
Yeah.
I remember being like Neil deGrasse Tyson was giving an interview, and someone asked him if he had ever suffered from depression. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, in my opinion, had one of the best answers to that, because he just goes, someone else had asked me that, so I decided to look on and reading about what depression is and how it affects you, and it really occurred to me, I have never been depressed.
Wow.
And I'm like, that is so refreshing.
It is.
Because everyone wants to believe that they've had the hardest life.
Yeah.
And, and that anyone who's felt anything, they filter it through their own experiences. Mm-hmm. That was so refreshing to hear.
It's so objective.
Yeah. And it's very scientific the way he tackled it. I started looking it up,
right.
reading about it.
Oh, that's funny.
I think so. If you look at someone, like here are the things that led them to have this issue, that just go, no.
Yeah.
There's a real lack of empathy.
Yeah, there really is. And I think it's getting better. I had it's interesting. I had a class a while back that was it was me and a bunch of like first year, like some of these kids were still in high school. They're 17, taking the class early, and something I noticed is there was a kid in the class who was very, super dorky. Like, I knew that kid. I knew that kid so well. I was that kid, in high school, and people did not treat him as such. And I wonder if it's getting better. Everyone was very empathetic. When he said something that was maybe a little like, oh God, in the class that would have a little cringy, I think is the word. No one took it that way. I would be like, oh,
they didn't take an advantage of the opportunity to ridicule him.
No, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. It was really eye opening because back in my day. Even in a college class, people would have at least like looked at each other, or you know what I'm saying? Like there was none of that.
I see.
It was amazing.
Well, they have done various studies to show that high school is the worst when it comes to that.
Oh yeah.
Because a large reason they believe is that there's not a big age gap. Like when you go to work. There's all these different people from all these different generations, and you gotta like function with these different people.
Sure.
And when it's only like a 4-year thing, it just becomes this sort of Lord of the Flies scenario.
People blowing on conch shells. And,
yeah. I don't know how true that is, but they took part of the studies. They took a bunch of students that were failing in high school, put them in college, and they started getting A's.
Sure, that makes
and it definitely can make sense. I think I constantly seem to surprise people when I tell them that I didn't show up to high school.
Yeah,
and that's only slightly exaggerating. It was like 2 days out of the week I would actually go to classes, and I ended up dropping out and then going back. And I think people don't expect that because I read books.
Well, you have a proclivity for academics. Yeah.
I like learning. I say things like a study was done in conversation.
Yeah. Totally.
I'm a fairly smart guy, and I really like to learn. I really enjoy learning, and so I think people think like, oh, then you must love school. And I think there's a large group. No, that actually can be quite a hindrance.
Totally, yeah. I remember I was out. I was like a TA or something. My senior year of high school, I had like one art class, and then I TA'd for the rest of the day. Like I had no real classes. Like I went to like a weird school, which is actually burnt down now.
Oh wow!
Yeah. But basically, like I did really poorly in math, and so they were just like, just don't do math. So then when I went to college, I had to take all this remedial, math in society, all this shit, because I took the placement test and was like, I mean, I've seen these symbols, but I couldn't tell you what they mean.
Yeah, I think Matt Damon wrote that down on a chalkboard.
Totally. So I had that, but I remember I was outside sweeping because that was part of my like TA class. I was sweeping the halls, and the principal walked by and he said, and they say we don't prepare you for your future, and can you believe that shit?
Oh my God. Holy crap.
And there's so much of that, and you just think like if you just didn't say shit like that to kids, they'd do great. It seems simple enough. Just don't say stuff like that to kids.
Did he then push you and call you a freshman?
Yeah. Push me in the girls' bathroom.
Give you a swirly.
Canned me. Threw me in a trash can. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was going to be really hard for me to accomplish, to know any kind of... it was going to be difficult for me to learn anything in high school showing up 2 days a week. So I basically didn't.
Sure.
Everything I knew I learned independently, and math was not one that I was going to pick up a math book and go like, oh, let's learn about some math.
Fascinating.
So I really, really faltered on that.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know about a lot about it. Now I'm in a STEM major years and years and years later, and I can pick it up, but I think something that would have benefited me is if they taught math like they teach other things. Like if you were to learn about history and you're in a class and someone says, and then this war started at this date, and you were to raise your hand and go, why? They go, oh, well, Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, and then this, the power, they might go like, oh, we don't know, but here's some ideas. If someone were to say, you use this algorithm to find out the radius of this, and you go, why? They go, just fucking do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Like they don't want you to figure anything out. They're not engaging you in math.
Right. And
it is a very fascinating field with a lot of history, but none of the teachers seem to know or care.
Yeah.
And so like someone who wants to learn, like I said earlier, they get completely turned off by that.
Yeah.
There's not like I was just reading about the school that does approach it differently, and they do have way better math.
I'm sure.
Math, and the example they gave was watching someone trying to figure out this computer program that puts like X over O, and then basically the trick is that no matter how much you try and change it, it will never flatten out the graph because it's an infinite. And so it just shows them figuring that out.
Right.
And imagine being taught math like that.
Yeah.
Where you're actually, and in other cultures, you will spend 20 minutes on one math problem.
Right.
In class. Never happened throughout high school, even college.
No.
It's just, here's the thing, do it. Here's the thing, do it. Here's the thing, do it. And instead of figuring something out.
Right. Well, so many people like math because there's a right and wrong answer, and that's it. And that's why people like it. I'm either right or wrong. That's great. I work with a guy who.
Well, I think they also like the immediate satisfaction. It becomes like a video game to them.
I get that totally.
Whereas like a lot of people they don't. That's not interesting. They don't like the immediate result. Also, if they're not. They don't have a proclivity to it, then they're just getting a lot of immediate negative like feedback.
I know a guy that loves math. He loves it, and he gave me that reasoning, and then was talking to me about social studies classes and stuff like that. And he said, "I have a struggle. Is it right? Am I right?" And I totally understand that. It's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah, and that's a big problem is when it comes to like classroom size and stuff like that. Is people have very different ways of thinking, very different ways of learning. And also, when you think and learn a certain way, you don't then stop and go, well, maybe my opinion on this might be a little wrong.
Yeah. Because,
that doesn't happen as often. I remember reading a book, and it was a really neat example where they were talking about Air Force pilots. And this guy, this was a preacher, he was writing, but he didn't take the Bible literally. He's like, I'm a Christian and it's a big part of my faith, but I don't take this literally. That would be weird.
Yeah.
And he's talking about these Air Force pilots, and he's like, they're some of the most brilliant people I've ever met. I mean, the amount of things they need to know to do what they do is huge. It's fascinating. But they take the Bible literally, and I'm like, but you're so smart. You think a talking snake is the reason people are sad? That's weird. And so what he began to think is, well, actually, the very intelligence they have means they can fly those planes. Because the intelligence they have is, look at this instruction, complete it, do not question it, and never get anything out of order.
Right.
And that's exactly the same way that they apply to 2,000-year-old poetry.
Yeah.
And that kind of intelligence does not work for 2,000-year-old poetry.
Right.
It does work for this other situation. And I don't want the guy who's really good at 2,000-year-old poetry flying the plane necessarily. He might really suck at that.
Right.
And it was a very interesting way to look at it, that there are people whose minds can, I have met a lot of people who are great at math and who hate reading.
Sure.
Or hate schools on reading or classes on reading, because they go like, what does this mean? And they go, it just means what it says. What do you mean, what does it mean? He said it.
Yeah, right.
What's Kafka's Metamorphosis about? It's about a big bug.
Yeah. It says right here, big bug.
Guy turns into a big bug. What are you doing?
He's not happy about it.
It's about the terror being turned into a big bug.
Right. Isn't that enough? Oh, man.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating. I can't, and I think that was a big problem I had throughout, is I can't just do that, and that was my problem in math.
Yeah.
Is they go, do this, then do this. But why? Why does it do that? Why is this thing over here now? Right. And I couldn't just listen to the damn words they told me to do and do it.
Yeah.
I would have sucked in the Army. Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would have just been screamed at, would have gotten really good at push-ups because I would have had to drop and get 20.
Yeah. I just spent a lot of time in that little jail they have there, probably. Just
would have been hated by everybody.
Oh yeah, because everything would be my fault, and then everyone would have to do push-ups or run laps because of me constantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It'd be like a Full Metal Jacket.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I'm just getting beaten with soap bars and socks.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Stop asking why we use this kind of gun. Just fucking use it.
Oh, dear. Well, that being said, Colossal. Really fun, dark comedy. Cool. We didn't even talk about how cool the monster is.
We got a little sidetrack.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty dope monster. Pretty legitimately scary. And definitely just like a super creative idea. And what was the movie of his that's on Netflix?
Open Windows.
Open Windows. Okay, I'm gonna check that out.
Check it out. It's the entire movie. Every single shot in the movie is done through a camera in a computer. So like there's just about every single shot is on a single laptop.
Okay.
And there's just a few other shots that are done through like another laptop.
Gotcha.
But yeah, really, and Elijah Wood's in it.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I like about Elijah Woods, he does some weird ass movies.
Yeah, he does.
That dude seems to really love underground cinema.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was an interview with him was one of the reasons I ever watched Meet the Feebles. He was talking about how much he loved it.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and Peter yeah, okay. All right. That's right. He's a little Hobbit man. Yeah. Anne Hathaway's fantastic. Jason Sudeikis is fantastic. Tim Blake Nelson is fantastic. And overall, the movie's just completely overrated.
I love this movie because it was like it captured every kind of movie in one movie, and it did it seamlessly. And that's why I think it's overrated.
Excellent. Until next time, then, this has been Overrated. I'm Michael J. O'Connor.
James Fluty.
We'll see you all next week.